Alright, so now I'm going to go back in the cabin, fix up these wires, put the connectors on in the cabin side, connect them to the actual gauges, and we can go from there. And we'll be done with that. So if you take this cover off right here, and I'm not sure if maybe my clips weren't on right, or maybe it's supposed to be like this, but I kind of just put a little bit of pressure. All of these clips came off and they're still on there, so make sure you don't lose the clips if you do have to take them off. But if you take off this, just 2 screws under these little covers, then you can move this whole wiring harness back, and then there's like actually a wire that goes back here and goes behind the manifold. So just push it back, and then, well, first put your oil cap back on. Now we can take off the intake manifold and with the fuel rail. So I'm gonna actually unbolt the intake manifold and we'll start on that. I think they're 11 millimeters, so I'll check on that and start taking it off. Alright guys, so I have everything pretty much taken apart. I have the fuel rail set aside because one of these little clips for the fuel rail actually broke, and well, it broke a while ago and I didn't actually take the fuel rail off. It's supposed to have this little clip that you push in and then it comes out. So I can stick something in there and take it out, but I don't really need to do that right now. I kind of just needed to get to the starter. The starter went bad. I need to replace the starter. I know that for sure. Going into the engine bay, this is one of the hoses that come off the throttle body right here. What we're going to do is cut this down to maybe 2 inches, and we're going to plug this hose. And the other hose is a little bit longer, and this is just all I had right now, but that's just to make sure the coolant doesn't come out. We're not going to leave that because we're actually deleting this entire hose. This right here is a port that goes straight into the engine bay, and that is where we're going to be tying in our temperature sensor to. So this is an adapter. You'll probably have one that comes with your kit. If you don't have one that comes with whatever gauge kit you're going to use, it's an M12 by 1.5 adapter, and then the actual sensor just screws into that and you put it into the head of the block. Now, I've seen some people try to get their readings from the upper radiator hose. They cut it right here and they put a little T adapter that goes in the radiator hose. They do it there, and then I also seen them drill a hole in the actual thermostat housing. Now, the issue with that is if you cut a hole here and try to get your reading from the upper radiator hose, or if you go to the radiator thermostat, the engine thermostat housing, the issue that comes up there is you're not really getting the most accurate reading because that is before the thermostat. So that's not going to be the most accurate reading. You want to get the reading from the closest you can to the actual engine bay, and that's going to be right there. So that port right there is where you're going to get it from. So yeah, remove this hose right here, delete it. We don't need that hose anymore. And then this other hose that goes to the throttle body, remove it. So make sure you remove these 2 hoses. We don't need them anymore. Plug this one, remove this one. That's pretty much it. I'm going to go ahead and remove that bolt. Alright guys, so I thought I got the right size adapter to fit in the engine block right there for the coolant temperature sender, but I didn't, so I'm still waiting on that adapter to come, as well as the adapters for the back of the oil filter housing that we're going to be using on the back of there that I'm going to show you guys. So for now, while I'm waiting for that, I'll show you how we do the actual gauges. So this is the interior of the car right now. Got a 5 Series F10 steering wheel. I have these F530 seats, super clean, power works and everything. These are my gauges. Got the double DIN setup. So for the gauge setup, it's very, very simple. So I don't have the battery in here right now, but when you turn the lights on, the lights for the gauges will turn on. They're bulbs on the back. We turn it off, it'll turn off. And how I have it set up is so that this actually works. So when you go down, when you go up, they will dim completely or get to full brightness. So as far as the whole gauge setup goes, it's very, very simple. Let me just pop all of this out real quick and I'll show you how it goes. So I put a link below. This is the wires I ordered. Very nice wires. It's positive and negative, but as you can see in the car, I didn't use the negative side to run through the engine. I cut the negative at the base, put the little wire connector on there, and ran it through the firewall. But it has this really nice coating on it, so nice wires. I'll leave the link in the description for these. The wires came with heat shrink and zip ties if you want to use those, which I probably will, to make sure everything is tight. And these I'll leave in the description. Wasn't too expensive, just a pack of wire connectors, and I think these are the ones I used. So I put them in the engine bay, the side that I put the connectors on, and then I fed them through the hole. And now that they're in the car, I'm gonna put the other side of the connector on the wiring. So very, very simple. Links for everything is in the description. Alright guys, so coming to the engine bay, once again, it's very, very easy to get these through the firewall. And really, I just drilled a hole next to the steering rack plate. Now, some people run their wires all the way to the left side of the engine, and then they go through a little grommet down there, but that comes out at the back of the glove box on the passenger side, and then you have to run them all the way to the center console, and then you have to take a bunch of stuff off. And then also it's running wires from your sensors is going to be over here all the way around the engine over there, so you have to run a lot of wire, and you have to take a lot of things off in there just to get to it. What I've done is, if you can see that, I drilled a tiny hole that is just large enough for 3 wires to go through, and then I drilled the hole, I sanded the little opening, sprayed some paint there so it doesn't rust, and then I put a rubber grommet over the wires themselves. So I have all these wires, I put the little connectors on them. So I have the oil water temperature sensor that's going to go right here. I have the oil pressure sensor that's going to go right here, and then on the very back of this I have the oil temperature sensor for the 3rd wire, and I'll show you where that actually comes through inside the cabin. Alright, so now I'm going to go back in the cabin, fix up these wires, put the connectors on in the cabin side, connect them to the actual gauges, and we can go from there. And we'll be done with that. So alright, so going into the cabin, you can see where the wires come through. It's right next to the steering rack plate, and there's just enough room for those 3 wires to come through. I route them under the carpet. You can just literally tuck them under this piece right here, and then I route them right there, pop them through there, and then that leads them right here for all 3 wires. So it's a very, very simple way to do it. Just make sure you put a grommet in between the hole that you cut. If you want to, it would be nice to move that hole over, maybe if you can get it somewhere right here, so it's not really behind the throttle pedal. Now this doesn't come in contact, and I made the wires go straight to the right as much as I could. But yeah, go ahead and measure the hole just a little bit better, maybe get it up an inch higher, maybe like right here, and then have them shoot straight under the dash, under the carpet right here, and you'll be fine. Guys, so this is the gauge pod holder. It actually fits in here so snug that it actually is able to glide up and down on the glides of the dash. So it pops in there just like a factory piece. So let's pop that out. So to keep this very, very simple and not be confusing, the top one right there, we see it says ground, that's the top post. The one on the right with the eye next to it, that is your auxiliary power post. And then the one on the left is your temperature sensor or your pressure sensor sender post. So the one on the left is going to go straight to whatever wire in the engine bay connects to your sensor. The one on the top is going to connect to the ground of your head unit. The one on the right is going to connect to the power of your head unit. So when you turn the key, the wire that turns the head unit on, when you turn the key, that's the same wire that you're going to connect the power of the gauge pod to. Now, what we have here is all of the wires for our bulbs meet up at the same place to connect to the dimmer wire for the head unit, which is an orange wire. And then all of our black wires, which are the ground wires, are going to connect to the ground of the head unit. So this is very important. When you connect the ground of your gauge pod you can use the same ground as the ground for your bulbs. This is the main ground of the head unit. But when you want to get power, you do not want to use the same power source as you use for the bulbs that is only tied to the dimmer switch, because that means that the gauges will only work when your power is on. So you want to make sure that this power line attaches to the actual main power source. So what I did here is I just took that wire, I cut it, and I used these connectors. So each post is going to have a positive and negative to go to the gauge for the ground and the power, and then at the end I'm going to tie into the direct power and ground for the head unit. So that's going to be the just regular auxiliary power. So whenever I turn the key, all the gauges will get power, and I save a little bit of wiring, so I don't just have a ton of wires going everywhere. So all these are just crimped down and heat shrink, and these right here all connect to the direct power source, and that'll be it for the gauges. So let's go ahead and do that, and I'll show you how it looks. As we have the wires set up now, all of these wires that are not going to be used for anything are basically stereo wires that aren't going to be hooked up at all. But we have all of the bulbs, the ground for the bulbs and the ground for the gauge meet up at the chassis ground for the stereo, and then we have the power source that is the main auxiliary power. It's tied to the stereo, but it also tied to all of the bulbs, and it's tied to power the gauges too. And all of these are basically one wire that goes to all of them for power, one wire that goes to all of them for ground and meets up at the same location, and then you have wires that go all the way through here on the back for the senders, and they go all the way to the engine bay, and all of those are labeled. So when my sensor comes in, just plug that in and it'll be good to go. Yeah guys, that's pretty much it. Hopefully the explanation works for you guys. I know when I was looking for the explanation to figure out how to do this, I kind of had to figure it out myself. There wasn't really too much information out there that was making it simple, so I kind of just figured, you know, where I can get power from, because I've did the install for the double dip myself. So hopefully that helps you guys out. Let's get back onto the engine bay and finish this up. Guys, so this is what I have right here. This is kind of like an adapter I made myself to screw in everything. It's super sturdy, it's not going to break or anything, but if you guys want to order the actual manufactured one for the E36 oil filter housing on the back of it, you can order that. It's about $100, which is why I didn't order that, and I decided to make one myself. So this will work. Basically just adapters. You got two 1/8 NPT adapters screwed into each other for the length of it. You have the original oil temp sensor screwed into this through a M12 by 1.25 to 1/8 NPT, screwing into the actual adapter, and then this one just screws straight into the adapter. This is a 1/8 NPT oil pressure sender, so it just screws straight in there. And then on the back, the oil temperature sensor just screws straight in there too. So the only one that you really need to actually make sure it screws into the oil filter housing is the one right here, which is an M12 by 1.25 to 1/8 NPT. And then for right there, you can just order the same thing, M12 by 1.25 to 1/8 NPT, so that you can screw the adapter into there, and then the sensor can screw into the adapter. So very, very simple. If that's confusing, I'll leave it in the description of everything I used, so you can just order it and then do it yourself. But if you want to just order the pre-made one, it's just a little expensive. So the sensor just came in, and when it's all said and done, it should look something like that. guys, so that's gonna be it for this video. Hopefully someone was able to benefit and use that wiring diagram that I sort of made for the E36. Hopefully help them out with their build. In the next video, I think I'm gonna be installing this boost controller. It's a TurboSmart eBoost 40 digital boost controller. Has a vacuum port on the back, so we're gonna be doing both the wiring and running the vacuum line. That's gonna be it for this video. I also have the E30 here. I still have to work on that, so a lot of videos are gonna be posted for this as well as it starts to progress. I did have the car working, so the car completely runs now over 300,000 miles, but it runs great. We've done a lot to this car already, so stay tuned for that. Stay tuned for what we have planned for the E36, and I'll see you guys next time.